All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of Real Talk. Hey, we have your hosts, Anand and Lilian, and we have a special guest, Michael Jordan.
Oh,
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
Michael, how are you? Longtime friend of the show, even though this is episode three.
have you watched any of our episodes?
I have watched some of your
Oh, okay,
episodes.
good. We only have two, so don't worry.
You can catch up. I'm sure he's going to watch this one, I'll tell you
For
that.
sure, I'll watch this one.
All right, so we don't really have a synopsis for Mike, but Mike is esteemed Harvard graduate and Imperial College graduate,
Sure.
uh, and all
Film
well-renowned.
lover. I took one film class in college. I like
Absolutely.
movies, so why
More
not?
than I have.
Yes, yes. And we're very excited to have him here because he always has very erudite analysis and vibes. He gives good vibes.
And I'll try to keep it like the right degree of spicy. You don't want to get too spicy, but a little spice in the sauce is
Be
good.
spicy. That's
I don't
great.
know how spicy we can get for this film. I'm just like, you know.
Okay, well, yeah, but
Yeah.
don't self-censor. So where are you right now, Mike?
I am in my apartment in London where I currently live, but I'm missing Singapore still. But that's neither here nor there.
So basically, Mike used to live in Singapore, which is how we know him, but then moved to London. Has it been a year, 2 years?
It's like a year and a half.
Okay, nice.
Mm.
Well, this will be a way that we can connect
Yeah, yeah,
through our shared love of film.
absolutely. Yeah.
That's
And
right.
I particularly wanted to talk about this film, The Zone of Interest, because Mike and I watched it roughly around the same time, like a year ago, almost to
Yeah.
the around this time. And I think I liked it a lot more than Mike, but Mike did like it a lot. He had a few problems with it, and Lillian hadn't seen it, and we just watched it very recently in the projector.
Yes.
They screened it for the German Film Festival, the first time the film was
Nice.
screened in Singapore. And I have a fresh take on it because I mean, not a fresh take. I watched it again after having a
Fresh
year,
for you.
fresh for me. And also, we've just found out that Mike is moments away from having finished his second viewing.
I just rewatched it like 10 minutes ago, so I'm fresh off of it, and I have new. I think I'm okay with the same overall impression, but I have new thoughts on it. So this is good to
Okay,
hear.
Amazing.
that's good. And Lillian, first time watching it.
Yes.
All right. So I guess before we do anything, I have a prepared synopsis that we can just power through it, absorb it, because the plot is it's very borderline. What you see is what you get. So the Zone of Interest presents a haunting, unique portrayal of the Holocaust by focusing on the domestic life of Nazi officer Rudolf Hoss. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. He was the commandant of Auschwitz and his family, set almost entirely on the idyllic property just outside the concentration camp. The story concentrates the brutal atrocities occurring within the camp walls, with the Hoss's family seemingly ordinary, serene life nearby. This juxtaposition emphasizes the chilling banality of evil as the family attempts to live a comfortable, insulated life while the horrors of the Holocaust unfold merely meters away. Jonathan Glazer, the director, his visual style and restrained storytelling create an unsettling atmosphere, underscoring how the perpetrators of historical atrocities often live in willful ignorance or indifference of them. So maybe we can get the ball rolling with essentially, one thing I need to remind the viewers is that in this film, you do not see any of the atrocities. You do not see anything that's occurring inside the camp. What we do experience is the noises that emanate from the camp. And because of our wide, I guess, familiarity with Holocaust films, our brains can conjure up images to support these sounds. So I think off the bat, I want to start off by asking, how do we depict atrocity? What is showable and what isn't? And how entertaining can films be that depict? How entertaining can films that depict atrocity afford to be? Yeah, you want to start off with that, Mike?
Yeah, sure. No, I totally agree. I think this is one of the most interesting things about this movie, and one of the reasons it's so successful. 'Cause I think there is a long running school of thought that says that essentially that it's immoral to make Holocaust movies in a certain sense, right?
Mm.
Because
Because you're like
movies
profiting
tie
off of atrocity.
not necessarily even profiting, but just right, like the way movies function is they try to entertain you,
Yeah.
and it's improper to see this atrocity through the lens of entertainment.
Yeah.
Even if like the message of the movie is great, and it's well done and it's serious and it's sober and all that, there's something sort of wrong about it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that I necessarily buy that, but I think it's a strong line of argument. And I think what makes this movie so successful is that it entirely bypasses that, right? You don't see any of the atrocities, but it calls, great attention to them. And I don't know, right? It's about a more interesting question in some ways than what happened. It's about, how did this happen? How did society
Yeah.
allow this to happen?
I
Yeah,
guess
it's really
documentary
good.
films are immune from this criticism, right? Like, yeah, it's just doling out
Yeah.
the information, it should be fine. So,
But I think you could still argue that, but maybe a topic for a different podcast, because I do think that there are fantastic documentaries, and then there are documentaries that do prioritize entertainment over investigative journalism, etc.
I
But
see.
anyway,
No, that's fair enough.
yeah.
What do you?
But okay, so I think so I really enjoyed this movie, which is that moral to say about something that's been geared to entertain me when it's an atrocity? No, just kidding. I thought that the thing that was really strong for me about the movie was, yeah, just like not really fully knowing what's going on until you start to get moments of confusion or kind of illusion where it's a seemingly very normal domestic activity, but there's just something a little bit off. And so I think that's really captivating because it kind of hooks you because you're already using your mind to try and figure out what's going on screen. And so in that way, I feel like you're seeing like the edges of the atrocity rather than being confronted with the visual of it, which is actually a lot longer, like lingers a lot longer. And I think I agree with Mike. Like that's why this movie is different and very impactful.
And one thing I wanted to just mention that Rudolf Höss was the commandant of Auschwitz, and his
Mhm.
actual house was 80 feet away from the camp. Everything that's depicted is based in reality. The entire Höss house is recreated from stock archival images. So that even gives an even creepier vibe. This isn't conjured up fiction. This really happened. I guess the idea of
Yeah.
it must have happened. And
Yeah. But I really like Mike's point about, I don't know if you want to elaborate a little bit more on the discourse around whether we can make movies about the Holocaust or like other mass atrocities, because I feel like in a certain sense, every director has a message. It's kind of like how it's executed. And a lot of times, if it's going to be a movie about the Holocaust, it's never like the Holocaust is good. It's always going to be like, we can't let this happen again. And the way that you achieve that advocacy goal is by playing to people's feelings. So I don't know if you want to talk about like Schindler's List or like other films that
Yeah,
have
well,
been
it's
feeling.
really it's a criticism people have leveraged against Schindler's List, and even like beyond the Holocaust specifically, I think there's the same discourse goes on about like war movies in general, right?
Mhm.
Which is the claim is like every war movie that tries to be anti-war, which is essentially all of them, right, ends up being pro-war because it can't help but um,
Glamorize it to a
yeah,
certain extent.
it ends up being a piece of entertainment, and so people like watching it, and then you kind of tap into these ideas about like the glory of war and the bravery of battle and yada yada yada. When the reality is war is just hell. People just die and it's senseless, and
but who is
um,
enticed into going into war after watching like All Quiet on the Western Front? I mean, like, I don't really buy this argument.
I'm not even saying that this is like my view. I'm just
Oh,
saying
yeah,
this is
that's fair
No,
enough.
yeah,
a long
Yeah.
running
yeah,
discourse. And so I think that's what makes this movie so um yeah, that makes this movie so powerful is that it is an entertaining movie. There's a narrative and there's a story and it's really engrossing. But because it's not really a war movie and it's not about, rubbing your face in, that's not the right phrase to use, but
no, but like seeing very
it's not
visual,
about,
like, yeah,
yeah, it's not visual and it's about the people who did it, who did this atrocity, and it's asking totally different questions. And then right,
yeah,
it's calling up, it's evoking the horror through sound, which is just a lot,
yeah,
right? It's very powerful, but it's not the same kind of like visual entertainment or visual like
yeah.
spectacle, right?
Yeah. And I know
And I
we
think,
definitely want to talk about sound, but one thing that you just made me think of is I feel that a lot of the preceding Holocaust movies or movies about war, the main interaction between the filmmaker and the audience is to evoke like sadness or to really pull on your heartstrings. But what I loved about Zone of Interest and what I really respect is it felt more like an intellectual engagement. Like I was really thinking about
Yes,
why, yeah,
yeah,
it wasn't something that was just like trying to evoke emotions out of me, although it
absolutely.
definitely did, but it felt like a very like respectful and two-way conversation with the audience.
Yeah, I think it respects the audience quite a lot.
Yeah,
So,
and I think like the way the way entertain is the wrong word, but like the way the plot works and the way like the story that's like stringing you through the narrative isn't about some big conflict or some big battle. It's like the slow reveal of exactly what's going on here and then how it's impacting everybody, right? Like you start and it opens with that shot of everybody at the river and it's so idyllic and like the girls
yes.
are in like white dresses and you're like, oh, this is so nice.
Yeah.
Um, and then you slowly start to see these things happening in the background. You go like, oh, is that a guard tower?
Yeah.
What is that smoke coming out of that
Yeah.
chimney? And then it progresses into like how it impacts the family. Like you start seeing the kids are doing strange stuff. Like the girl is up all night, and the other kid, pushes, traps his brother in the greenhouse and all these things. And so it's about you're starting to realize what's going on here and then learning more and more about how it's decaying these people. It's like
Yeah.
rotting the soul of the society.
Well, because you brought up the opening, I also wanted to comment on the very first thing that happens, which is just that black, like it's the screen is black for a long time and you hear before you see. And it's very simple, but it's so effective for Jonathan Glazer to prime us to be listening.
Yeah.
Totally,
And,
totally.
like you're listening before you ever are confronted with anything visual. And then he like does exactly what you said, like it unfolds more. But I just love that he was like communicating to us as an audience, like, okay, this is like what I want you to be looking for or listening to. Yeah.
Yeah. I think before we go deeper into this film, I want to talk about the elephant in the room, which is Schindler's List.
Okay.
I think I love Schindler's List. I think it's one of the best films ever made, but it does. I think cheers to Steven Spielberg because he never took a dime from Schindler's List. He considered it blood money,
Yeah.
but it is an insanely entertaining film. I can rewatch it any time of the day, but I have problems with it, and I've always wanted to do this click here for Michael Haneke's problems with Schindler's List, which is also my problem, particularly that scene where they go into the shower room, gas chambers, and then there's the suspense involved is will they be gassed or will they be showered? And it just water comes out. And I found that really offensive, that scene, because it used like all the tricks of the trade that Hitchcock uses and suspense uses, and the audience is supposed to be relieved. It's kind of cheapens like the whole dynamic of it. But with regards to Schindler's List, is it okay that it's entertaining? What's everybody's views on Schindler's List? Like, is it
Uh,
bad? Should
I
Schindler's
think
List?
I think it's an incredible movie. I agree. It's just a fantastic film. Um, I'm fine with it being entertaining. This is one of those things where like I think, there's no consensus answer and reasonable people can disagree. Um, I'm fine with it being entertaining, but I understand how someone could find that, disrespectful. I don't know. To me, like the shower scene is a lot about I think the intention there to me is like evoking the capriciousness of life and death in this system. Like I agree. Like you're absolutely right. And I know this is the criticism that people
Yeah.
love against it, right? Like it's used as kind of cheap suspense and yada yada. Um, but to me, I think it speaks of how human lives in this system are so cheap that life and death is just based on these odd turns. Like I can't
Yeah.
remember, like right, like these people were going to be saved, and then just I can't remember the exact plot detail, but like someone screwed up the paperwork or something, and
Yeah.
then they were gonna. So that's how I would like defend that choice thematically. But yeah, I think Schindler's List is a great movie. If someone finds it disrespectful because it's too much like
Yeah.
meaty, like big images, big emotions, Hollywood traditional filmmaking, and they don't like that about a death camp, I think that's fine
Then they
too.
should watch Zone of Interest, like
Yeah.
this
Yeah,
is
yeah,
the movie. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I also wanted to ask one more question. Is like Terry Gilliam made this argument against Spielberg and Schindler's List is that Holocaust is a representation of human failure. It's just abject failure on every level. But Spielberg choose 1 ounce of like happiness or success that has occurred, where Schindler managed to save a couple hundred Jews. And also in the Zone of Interest, they also have this woman who is a Polish freedom fighter. I can find her name, but let me see her name so that we can. Alexandra Bistron Kolodziejczak. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing it. She's a Polish World War II resistance worker and witness to the Holocaust. As a young girl, she left food for prisoners in the Auschwitz concentration camp. She's depicted in the film by hiding like apples, I think, and the workers' shovels and things of that nature. And the bicycle that was used in the film is her real bicycle, and she was
Wow, I didn't know that.
actually asked to about her if she could be depicted in this film very shortly before she died.
Wow.
So I just wanted to ask about like, is it important to include like, moments of happiness and positivity in very bleak stories like this?
Oh, I think I know Mike's answer, but I'll do a counterpoint. What do you think, Mike?
As a general point, I think it's just up to what the filmmaker, the artist wants to do. I don't know. Broadly speaking, I think it's fine to tell a hopeful story even from the context of a tragedy. I think we can appreciate the scope of the tragedy in other ways, but I think it's fine to tell hopeful stories. In terms of this specific movie, I would have cut the Apple stuff.
Yeah,
I think it was a little, I think obviously like he films it with this sort of night vision thing. I think
I
it's very
know.
visually incongruous. It's very jarring.
Agree. Yeah, I
Um,
thought it looked
it,
bad, but anyway,
the first time I watched it too, I just wasn't sure what was going on.
yeah,
And to me, the heart of this movie, what this movie is all about, is staring at the heart of like this banal evil of this
yeah,
family. So I don't know that I needed the Apple stuff, and
yeah. But I
I
will
would.
provide a slight counterpoint, which is from much more, this is kind of how I view all movies, is like an artistic and visual effect point of view. I, if I were to defend the inclusion of having the night vision scenes where this freedom fighter goes and puts different fruits in the camp for the prisoners, I feel like the first time I saw that, I didn't know what was going on. And I do think that Jonathan Glazer does a lot with us. He's trying to get us to question how could this happen? But the way he does that is by having us question what's happening on screen, right? So like
Mhm.
when they're picking out the clothes from the parcels, the mail that's come, you don't really know what's happening. So you're tuned in to trying to figure out what happens. And then later you find out, okay, well, that came from the concentration camp. And so I think similarly for the night vision scenes, I also thought visually not appealing and like took me out of it. But it did kind of contrast, I feel like, with the kid who was night walking. Because at first I was like, oh, is it her? Is she having these dreams? Is this a fantasy? And so maybe this isn't like a great defense, but I can see a little bit in the way of just trying to get the viewer to pay attention and like understand that there are odd things happening. That's kind of how I at least understood it when it first happened. Then it kept happening. And then it did kind of turn into this, well, at least there was one person who was doing something good. And then I do agree with you, Mike. Like I feel like the message, like that it was trying to portray was a little bit just jammed in there.
I think, yeah, universally, everyone who I've seen watch this movie does not like, particularly, they don't like the night vision aspect of it. I think I'm probably like the
You
only
were
person
okay with it. Yeah.
I think I was quite emotionally affected by it
Okay.
because to me, I wasn't thinking about anything else other than like they must be starving. They
Mhm.
must be thirst ridden. Like that was just going through my mind. And I was just like,
But I just had no idea
yeah.
what was happening because all you do is see this girl put apples in the mud. I didn't even know it was a
I think I
concentration
caught on
camp.
to it pretty
Yeah,
quickly.
I don't think
Yeah.
I caught on to it. Yeah.
And I really like it because I really like Jonathan Glazer not lecturing me and not
Yeah.
like he's very much like this is happening. What do you think about it? And I like
Mhm.
that. I feel like he respected me as an audience. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
But just remind me, so does that have a happy ending? Doesn't she kind of incite some mass incident at the camp?
I
By
don't
I
as far
don't.
as I remember, I just watched it. I don't think much like she does it twice. Like there's
Yeah.
as far as I recall, there's two scenes of her hiding apples. In the second one, she finds a little tin can with some
Oh,
sheet notes for
Yeah.
music written in it. She goes home.
And she plays.
They're speaking Yiddish, so you know it's a Jewish family, and
yeah.
obviously it's Poland. And then they play. Then someone plays the song at the piano, and
Yeah.
then that. But
The
like
there's
that's
the
it.
poem. So I found that very emotionally moving. That was probably the only time in the movie where I felt my heartstrings being tugged in a similar way to maybe Schindler's List, is they start to recite that poem with the music. I think it's from a concentration camp survivor who had written that like kind of hopeful poem. But I do think the second scene that they show, like it causes them to fight each other because they were fighting over the apples. But
Oh, that's right. Yeah, yeah. That made
right,
it.
but
Yeah, that's
I
right.
don't think
That
there
made
was a
it.
point there. I think it was just like
Yeah,
realistic, probably
yeah,
something
yeah,
that actually happened.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So I think we would be remiss. I need to mention this one film that is actually a sister film to The Zone of Interest, and they both have the same main actor. The person who plays Rudolf Horst. This film is called The White Ribbon. I would recommend everybody to watch it. It's by Michael Haneke, and the premise of that is it's this quaint German village in the middle of nowhere, and you just follow the lives of all the people living in it, where all these random horrible occurrences start happening, and you think the children might have something to do with it. And then the end of the film ends with the onset of World War One, and then you sort of figure out that these kids are going to grow up to be Nazis, and that sort of gives you like, where does evil come from?
Yeah.
What is the origin? Similar themes to this one. So I'd recommend everybody watching that. And Jonathan Glazer himself has said he was inspired by that to make this. Just thought I'd put that
You
out
know
there.
what? You know what's occurring to me just as a side note that I think also could be an interesting companion film to this one is the documentary The Act of Killing.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Have you seen that? I feel like the themes are exactly the same. The Act
Yes.
of Killing is an amazing documentary. It's really like it's hard to watch. I won't
It's,
get
What's
into
it
we can
about?
talk about it another time. But.
no, no,
Okay,
no.
give the premise.
Yeah, give it.
No, so the premise of the Act of Killing, it's a documentary about the wave of kind of supposedly anti-communist killings that took place in Indonesia in I think the 60s.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And they were US backed and anyway, but it's in the kind of the 2000s. I can't remember exactly when it came out, but the
Yeah.
director interviews a guy who was a teenager when those killings took place and did those killings himself. He was part of like the squads that went out and just murdered people. And like in a lot of places around the world, when societies collapse and there's a supposed justification, it's actually just revenge, business rival, whatever, who
Yeah,
killed.
always.
But so he interviews this guy about these things, but this guy now he's kind of older. I think he's in his 70s, and he is very proud of what he did. He thinks he's cool. He thinks he's a
Yep.
gangster. He explicitly
Yep.
compares himself to people in The Godfather. And so what the director does is he invites this guy to make a movie reenacting what he did. Uh, and you watch the guy making this movie reenacting his crimes, and as he's
Realize.
doing it, he comes to realize like the true evil of what he did.
That's
What he
like the
did.
power of film then.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
it's really an amazing documentary.
they're being reenacted as films. Like they're like dress up
Yeah,
like you're in The
Yeah.
Godfather
But
and
it's like
pretend
yeah,
once
you're.
we see it, then we can acknowledge it, which is
yeah,
like so meta because that's like what all these films
yeah,
are trying to do.
But I find
yeah.
it kind of difficult that people don't realize they're doing terrible things in the moment and they need to be reenacting it
I know.
5 decades later. I don't know. It
But
find
that's something we could
it's
talk about here is like
Yeah,
also
but
what
that's this movie, right? I mean, it's like
yeah,
these people. The weird thing about like that, the interesting thing about what gets depicted in Zone of Interest, right, is it's not like any of the characters hate Jewish people,
mm.
at least not explicitly. They don't go around talking
There's
about, right?
even like underlying like jealousy or like they
Yeah,
wear their clothes, they want
it's
their furs. Yeah.
yeah, they don't care about them, right? They're not in their zone of interest per se,
Yeah.
right? And so they're very happy to commit these atrocities because they just think they're like outside of their moral universe. At least that's how
I think
that's
that's where we need to redefine or analyze the word hate, because I don't know if it's easy to say they don't hate them.
that
It's
okay,
like
that's going a little too far.
I no, because
You know what I mean? Like you don't hit like
yes,
in this movie, the married couple doesn't sit at home talking about
absolutely,
Yeah.
right,
yes.
I
I just think
despise
they're
you people.
dehumanized. I just think they're like not
They're
human.
dehumanized, yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, like there's a particular scene that took me was when we'll get into the mom later, but when the mom leaves suddenly and the helper, the Polish helper in the house, she leaves food out. And then she was like, "Did you leave out the food just to antagonize me or something?" So as she takes the food away, she's like, "I'll have my husband kill you." She makes this offline remark.
Yeah.
And to me, that was really, really frightening because she thinks she's the queen of Auschwitz.
Yeah.
She's so much more above every other human being
Yeah.
that really hit me.
Well,
Yeah.
and that's it's like they're very happy to kind of ignore what they're doing,
Yeah.
and
Until it
right,
serves them to
until it serves them, or until they're pushed into a corner, or until they're angry, and then it's not just oh we're letting this thing happen. It's I can have you killed. It's yeah,
Then
it's
they behave like Nazis, that's what they do.
oh they're yeah
Yeah.
they're
Well,
exactly
maybe we're going to discuss this later, but I think that's one of the biggest questions from the film is whether the Commandant A knows what he's doing or like is evil, or B, if he doesn't know or doesn't care, is there some kind of like psychic wound that he's still inflicting on himself because
Mhm.
of like the vomiting? But I feel like that is like a key question that this movie is trying to address.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think so. Moving on to the next topic, I want to talk about how this film evokes our similarities with the perpetrators. And I think this was the most, I think the aspect of the film that I responded to the most, because I think this is not really well explored in film. There's only very few films that have done this, or because it's very tricky and it's very fine line to talk about an atrocity, especially through the eyes of the perpetrator. I think the only other film that's done this is Star 80 with it's a Bob Fosse film. If you want to watch that, watch that. But what do we think about this? Do you think I think if I was in Nazi Germany in the late 30s, I would be complicit. I don't know how anyone else would say they wouldn't, because it's such an it's so as we mentioned, it's so pervasive. It is anti-Semitism is so rife throughout the whole Weimar Republic.
Yeah.
And particularly when in this film, the domesticity, the idealism, I particularly got caught up in the domesticity of him saying he's so successful in Auschwitz that they're going to send him to a different higher role, and the wife saying, I want to stay here. I was caught up and I was like, oh, he's got a promotion. And then I had to take a step back and like they're
Yeah.
routinely killing 100,000 people
Yeah.
before dinner.
Yeah.
What are we doing?
To her, it's her best life. She even says, like, look how far we've come.
Absolutely.
We were good, stuck in some bumpkin town, and now.
Yes.
But I thought you were going to say the scene where she's like, will you take me to the spa? Will you take me to on vacation, on holiday? And that is like her mindset. That's like the thing she cares about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Particularly garden. She's so proud of her garden. She's the queen of art. She's showing it off. She had all this. Yeah.
And there's that montage of, I think she just talked about, showed off her garden to her mother. Oh, mom, look how great I've done in life. And then, then it cuts to a montage of just close-ups of flowers while you hear the sounds of the camp in the background.
Yeah.
That's such a stretch, but that gets to the heart of, right, like, the banality of evil. Like I said, like these people are furthering themselves. They want what they want, and the people who they're massacring are just outside of their moral universe.
Yeah, totally.
And I also want to touch about, like, I think a very key thing she said was the vines will cover it up.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I think that was very telling to me.
I would love to talk about this with you guys. I feel like that suggests that they know.
They know. They have to know.
Yeah.
They have to know some stuff. Like.
Okay, certainly, they definitely know, because she says, I could have my husband, whatever, scattered.
No, not just know, like, in the knowledge way, but like know that it's evil, like know that it's like not moral. I don't know, like, even though it's in the name of an ideology or in the name of a political state or in the name of racism, like there's still something about killing humans that they know is not right.
Yeah. I mean, in fact, the Holocaust itself, Hitler tried to distance himself from it and had all documentation removed from himself. He didn't sign anything. Everything was hushed. I struggle to understand why, because it clearly was his crowning jewel of his administration. He keeps talking about the final solution and how happy he is to conceive it. Then why try and hide things? Like, why do we have such sparse, like, Wannsee conference of actual written documentation of meetings of them perpetrating this? Like, I don't know.
But to your question, I think I felt very intellectually engaged. Like, he was challenging me to think. I definitely got that experience, but I don't know that I felt like they were a stand-in for me. Like, I didn't relate to it. They were still like in a position of power, and like within, maybe it was still an administration perspective or like a very tactical or technical role, but I don't really know that I felt that they were meant to represent like the everyday person in Germany and how they're.
I think it asks a question that anybody could relate, which is, right, like, what do any of us ignore in our lives? What not the name, but you're right. Like, what is it that any of us are happy to ignore because we're just focused on our own lives and furthering ourselves?
But I think it's different, though. I think it's in the pursuit of ambition, because I don't think either of you would be literally commandants at concentration camps. I think you wouldn't protest, you wouldn't stand up for them, whatever. Like, I all think we would be complicit on the spectrum of complicity. But I think that maybe isn't fully Jonathan Glazer's point, because he does pick like literally the king and queen of Auschwitz. And so I feel like maybe a different message is more like, this specific case study of this family and in their pursuit for trying to get ahead or trying to get to the top. Because I think he's very driven from a career point of view, and she's very driven in her domestic
Mhm.
realm.
Yeah.
And then that
And
kind of
there are
almost, yeah,
and there are characters who do, right? Like the mom comes, and the mom at first is like, "Oh wow,
Absolutely.
honey, so this is so wonderful. This is so you've really done well for yourself." And then as she's like living there for the day, right? She's hearing the sounds, and then it kind of climaxes. There's a night shot where she's like, I think what's happening is ash from the chimneys,
she
Yes.
can
and
see
Yeah.
then the
the
mom goes
burning.
out and pulls in the clothes, and then she leaves the next day, like
Yes.
Yeah.
you know,
So yeah, I think we would
she's
close
for
our
her.
eyes
She
and run away.
she
Like I
tries
think
to
we would
get
do that.
okay, I need to say this. I would love to agree with you on this point. I can't fully because the proof is in the pudding. It's only until we've been in this situation and been brought up in that environment can we say anything definitively. I think it's because we live in such a peaceful environment. We have food in our bellies.
Oh,
We're
but I
very
just
well
don't think we're
taken.
competitive enough to make it to Commandant.
You never know. You can never say anything definitively. Different circumstances, different upbringing,
Yeah,
different
I mean,
everything.
yeah,
You could be a totally
yeah.
different person.
I mean, I'm willing to say I would be evil. It's not that. It's more just like knowing myself, I'm like not that driven at work and I'm kind of lazy. I'd probably be the one, I'd be the mom. I would just like remove myself from it, probably not tell just ignore it, close my
Yeah.
eyes. Like that's, I think, would be the
No,
most
it's a very deep question. Like I don't know. So I went Maya and I were in Amsterdam a couple months ago, and we went to the Anne Frank house. And a question I was asking myself afterwards, because they're essentially they hid in the it was sort of behind a business, right? So like it was like a storeroom, old storeroom of a business they were hiding in. And I couldn't help but like ask myself afterwards, would I have been as brave as that
I
business
definitely
person?
wouldn't have. No, I would
Knowing
not.
that like
I feel
I'll
like
be
it's too
killed.
risky.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it's a very, who knows who knows how brave anyone would be in those
Yeah.
circumstances.
I'm reading this book now on the Second World War, and one of the arguments that they were made for like some of the people working in the camps were like, it's either this or go to the Eastern Front.
Mm.
I don't know if I'd want to go to the Eastern Front. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
there are so many different aspects that could
Yeah.
be involved in
But
this. It's,
I'm just trying to make the point. Like, sure, I could be sent to the concentration camp. I could be like a day laborer. But I think there's a reason why Jonathan Glazer picks this family and like this locus of power. Like
Mm.
I think there's an artistic choice because he could have
absolutely.
made a film about an everyday person. Like, look how easy it is to be evil. But I think he made an artistic choice in showing like the power, like the
You're right.
people at the
You're
top.
right.
Yeah.
They
Yeah,
are
yeah.
very much profiteering from this. Very
Yeah.
much so.
Yeah. And I think it's very compelling to like see that, like to see what, what they care about
Yeah.
and how they live their lives.
I just wanted to mention this line from Parasite that I like a lot, where one of the characters says, "Oh, these rich people are nice," and she replies, "They are nice because they are rich." Do you
Hmm.
know what I mean? Everything I think
There's a lot
is,
of truth to that. There's a lot of truth
yeah,
to that. Oh.
yeah. Your circumstance in life dictates your attitude towards morality. But anyways, like the next topic would be the meditations on the banality of evil. Is this a day-to-day occurrence? Is this business as usual? Is this, how, what do we think? Like, are we all Adolf Eichmann deep down? Another 100,000 here, another 50,000 coming in? Like, what do
I
we
hope
think?
not.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like that's what we just discussed. And
Yeah,
I feel like I would very easily be a cog in the system. I'm not saying I would like go out of my way to hide Anne Frank, almost definitely not. But I do think there's a reason why this story is focused on like these certain individuals in positions of power rather than like the everyday person.
but are they lying to themselves, or do they really believe in this idea of being the Untermensch and everybody else are all
Mm.
Übermensch? They're subjugated, they're all racist, or they really believe that this racial hygiene is wonderful for the continent,
I
or
don't know.
what's
That's
that?
always an interesting thing, right? Is to what degree do any of these people to do kind of the far right authoritarians by their own,
Ideology. Yeah.
right. And I think I don't know, it's a fascinating question, but like I don't know, it makes me think of like I read something about the Stasi and like people ratting on other people, and a lot of it wound up just being business rivals,
Yep.
right?
Petty squabbles.
Yeah,
Cultural revolution too. Yeah.
yeah, Cultural Revolution too. So like around like you were rejected romantically, whatever it is.
Yep.
And so it's a fascinating question to what degree when people do these horrific things, do they buy the ideology, or is it just a means to an end of something
I think
they
for
want?
the wife, it's very much a means, like she chooses to stay there because she has a huge house, she has a huge garden, she has self-fulfillment in a way she probably wouldn't have in any other situation. She's raising four great kids or whatever. For the male, for the commandant, I think it's less clear. I can only understand his motivation as being very like driven. Like he does seem motivated by like being promoted and like getting more responsibility. But you would think that of the two, he would be the one that's more bought into the ideology.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
But he doesn't. I think the actor, all of the performances were
Yeah, we
wonderful in
should
this
talk about the
film,
acting too.
and he seemed very much day in, day out. Hi, honey, how's your day?
And they
He
tried to
didn't
depict that by washing the blood off his boots. Like
absolutely.
it's so normal to have blood on your boots after a day
And
of
this
work.
is probably a weird thing to say. He seems kind of like a nice boss. He doesn't seem like an asshole. I mean, he is an asshole, but he
That's
doesn't seem
probably a
Well,
like.
he
point
gets pissed about the lilac.
Sorry.
Say it again.
He gets pissed about the lilacs.
Oh my God, you're so right, Mike. That's a counterpoint, I feel.
I just
Wait,
I just
remind me,
watched it,
yeah.
so it's funny. There's
He
like one
gets
scene where he's like he has a memo because he's pissed off that like the SS soldiers have been like plucking lilacs from the bushes
Oh
while
yes, yeah.
I
But I think
don't
that's
know,
also the
but
Nazi nature stuff, how they were so obsessed with nature and how like Hitler was he I think there's like communications where he said like why are we better than the animals? We are on the same equal footing. Like nature's really elevated in the Nazi ideology and or like when they dumped the ashes into the river and things like that.
yeah, yeah. I think with him it's about right. There's a lot of satisfaction taken in making money and being good at something.
Yeah,
And
agreed.
there's that scene at the end where he's talking to his wife on the phone, like they shipped him off, and then he
Yeah.
went to a big meeting with all like the SS folks, or I don't know if they're SS, but all the leaders. And and she asks, "Oh, who was there?" And he says, "Oh, I couldn't pay attention. I was too busy figuring out how I would gas them all."
Oh,
Yes,
you know
yeah.
what? You're so right, Mike. He also does love his job, like in the
Yeah,
sense
he
that his
loves it.
job
He
is the
loves.
conceptual, like the conceptual problem solving for how to mass murder.
I don't know if
Mhm.
it's love because like I did an internship once at an engineering like air duct company. And I remembered after doing that internship, everywhere I went, I would look up at the ceiling. It's not that I
It's
really
just
loved
like
the
in your
job. It was
brain.
just in my brain. I was like, oh, so
Yeah.
this is the ducting for this place and that's that.
But
So
maybe it's, yeah, but I think they both can coexist kind of. I don't know. It's definitely like he's in this different mindset where that's what he's geared towards thinking about. And so maybe, yeah, I don't know. But I do think you're right, Mike, because I feel like that's the only time he smiles in the movie, really, is when he's talking about
Yeah.
his career advancements.
Yeah, it feels good to make money and to be good at something.
Yeah.
Everybody likes
And
that,
like the
right?
recognition, it's such a hierarchical system.
Recognition, yeah. Oh, you get the gold star,
yeah,
And then so then you get like what's that the old quote about, it's hard to you can't it's hard to convince a man of something if his job requires him to not know it.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so yeah, anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also want to talk about one scene, which I think is probably the most chilling scene in the whole film, was when they were talking about the plans for that special incinerator that would
Mm.
go around, where they were talking about so casually, where it would work 24 hours a day. And these are German engineers. You can't get any better engineers in the world than these guys. They know what they're talking about. They're so ruthlessly efficient. And that scene really stuck in my mind. I guess
Yeah.
in the banality of evil.
But
Mm.
now, yeah. Yeah.
Like,
No,
yeah, it's a
absolutely.
business, it's an engineering problem. It's a like we're not gonna there
Yeah.
like no
Yeah.
realization that these are humans. Yeah.
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 Before we get off this topic, I just want to talk about proximity and sensory awareness, which we have talked about. But I personally would have thought if I'm in Berlin having a chummy life, it's happening in
Yeah.
Dachau, it's happening in
Yeah.
Auschwitz, I don't really care. I'm 80 feet from Auschwitz.
Yeah.
Why is it hasn't like changed anything at
But
all?
that's why, so my understanding is that zone of interest is that rim around the concentration camp to keep the horror away from like the everyday people. And
Mm.
so like the commandant and the other officers live within whatever meters of the concentration camp, but actually the zone of interest exists to try and like distance it away from like the town or the
Yeah.
other people.
I mean, I was curious about it because there's a really good film that I like called To Be or Not to Be. It's like a farce comedy, and that was filmed in 1942, and they made mention of camps in that film. And I was
Mm.
like shocked by this. I was like, this is 1942. They knew about the camps already, and then I was reading up about it that they thought they were like rehabilitation camps.
Correct.
No one knew about the devastating effects of it,
Yeah. But that's
So,
what I learned
It
like
was limited,
rewatched
I
all
think.
it.
sorry.
Yeah. Like I think like later in the war, Time did a spread, but
Yeah.
it was limited, at least in the US. I don't know what the German public. It actually makes me think. So we also went we went to Dachau this year or last year. And one of the things they show there is after the Allied soldiers broke in and kind of took over the camp, they marched some of the townsfolk in and forced them to look at like what had been going on.
Yeah, yeah. I think I saw that in Band of Brothers. I didn't know if that was like real. It's good to know that it was real that they were forced to do it. All right. The next topic of conversation will be on the film itself, cinematography, visual, sound design, production. So the first thing we want to re-emphasize, this house is built from scratch that emulates the actual Hosse's house. And this film was done actually with surveillance cameras. So the actors actually couldn't see the cameras itself. So it was hidden and it was very fluid and it was like Big Brother in a Nazi house. Yeah, and also I want to make a note of the sound design in this film before I open up to general discussion. They actually had two scripts. One was film one, which is what we see, and film two is what the sounds that you're hearing. So every sound that you hear is actually has a story behind it that they have worked on, but it's not explicitly told. So if you actually hear it hard enough, they even where the sound emanates from which part of the camp, they actually had a map. This sound would come at this side and this sound would come at that side. And the other thing to mention was that all of these sounds that you hear weren't made in a recording booth. They're actual real life sounds of human beings being animated in the world. For example, they would go to German football matches or they'd go in the middle of the night. I think it was around I can't remember where, but they would record screams and sounds and then they would piece them together because they didn't want any artifacts. Yeah, well, I think the sound design itself this is probably the best sound design I've ever seen in a movie ever. And it kind of annoyed me because when I first watched it, it hadn't come out in cinema, so I had to watch it on my TV at home. And when I have my TV at home, I have my JBL speakers very close to me, so the sound was very pervasive. And when we watched it in the cinema, I was excited because I thought, oh, we're going to have a good sound experience, but it really wasn't, as good of an effect. I don't know how you felt about the sound in the
Oh,
cinema.
I have nothing to compare it to.
Yes, of
But
course.
also, I just know that cinemas in Singapore are not like the best, and we weren't the best
Was it the
cinema. But
projector? I mean, they don't have the best like.
it's the old gold. It's the new projector, which is the Golden Village, which also isn't the best.
Okay.
But
I mean, it wasn't IMAX, but I don't. I just felt having the speakers very close to you really would have helped because there's so much nuance in the sound. So
Yeah,
but I would
yeah,
still, having said that, I would still go see it in theaters because I think
absolutely.
in general the experience would be a lot better.
yeah.
But Mike, are there scenes in particular where like the sound of, or like maybe when did you first start noticing the sound effects? Are there particular scenes where the sound effects really like came through for you to make a point?
I thought, well, first maybe I'll just quick on the camera work. I didn't know they shot it surveillance style, but that completely
Okay.
came through. I think the camera work is so smart, and
Mm.
the visual style completely fits with what they're trying to do. You get this fly on the wall like voyeuristic thing. It was kind of Ozu
Very
to me a little bit,
continuous.
not to get all film nerdy, but it was a little Ozu, a lot of just like static shots from a distance,
Yes,
Yes.
not a
yeah.
lot of like camera movement. Um, but yeah, anyway, on the sound, I think I totally agree. This is like one of the best odd. I don't pay attention to sound design that much when I'm watching a movie, but this is like has to be one of the best sound designs I've ever
Mhm.
heard. It is so effective. And one thing actually I noticed, there's just so many little smart details in how they do it. One thing I really noticed this go around was if you're listening, which I think like the movie trains you to, so you should be listening to the background sound the whole time. In all the scenes in their house, there's like this kind of very low thrum. It's really, really
Yes,
low
yeah.
in the mix,
The
but
humming. Yeah,
it's the humming there, and it just sort of it puts you on edge a little bit. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
at first I thought, oh, this is like a non-diegetic sound that's just there to like cause tension, and isn't that smart? And then I noticed when they're not in the house, it isn't there. And I thought, oh, it's actually I think this is probably the sound of like the equipment in the camp, maybe. I don't know if it's the crematorium or factory or something. Um, and so that I was like, that actually kind of really hit me the second go around. I thought, wow, that's horrifying, you know?
The
Um,
constant bullets that are pervasive throughout the whole film.
yep,
Every few
yep.
minutes, it's like bullet spray. It's like
Yeah. There's one thing too I noticed. This is me being a little interpretive, I think, but like one so I think we'll maybe we can get into this a little later, but so I think this is a fantastic movie, obviously, but my quibbles with it are all when it gets a little bit too arty, I think. And there's towards the end when the Commandant has been sent away And I think in a few other locations, there's just this really like overwhelming, like wah, wah, wah sound that
Yeah.
like plays at the top. And the first time I saw it, I thought, oh, like you're getting a little art house in an annoying way. It's like this is this flourish that isn't necessary. And the way I interpreted this time was actually having interpreted the low thrum as like the sound of like the camp or the crematoriums, the big loud noise. I felt like, oh, maybe that was that amplified. And this is
Hmm.
like the echo of it in this distant place. And maybe
I love
it's
it.
coming to
Mike's
mind. It's
interpretation.
just an
Yeah.
interpretation. I don't know.
Yeah. Maybe I'll jump in on the visual side because I feel like it's very obvious to see how impactful the sound design is. But I think maybe as film lovers, we're very attuned and used to like impactful visuals. And so the fact that the sound was so great, that's like a very easy thing to pick up on. But I think he does the exact same thing for a lot of the movie with the visuals, which is like it'll be a scene of the garden or a garden party, but the background will be smoke or the
Mm,
background will be orange from
Yeah.
like the burning that's going on. That's the one
mm,
example that sticks out in my head, but I feel like there are multiple like visual examples as well, where if you're paying attention, you'll see the visual juxtaposition of this perfect domesticity with like weird things in the
mm.
background. And so I
Yeah.
love that he like did it both visually as well as with the sound. And then I was just going to go off of Mike's point about being too arty. So my little quibble about it being too arty is also related to the visuals. And I don't know if it's the same time as the sounds, but do you remember when it fades to red? All of a
Yeah,
sudden,
no, I was going to bring that up. Do you guys have an interpretation of that? I didn't need
I,
that. I didn't
I
I
need
didn't need it. I
that.
didn't need
I
it
am
at
once
all.
again going to differ because I liked it. I think the reason I liked it, well, I understand your arguments against it, and it is a bit like
Can you remind
film
me when it
student.
happens?
It happens when she's showing her like her baby the flower. Do you
Yeah.
remember it? And
Okay.
then we start
I,
zooming on the flowers.
Okay.
I think it's near the flower montage, like the flower close-up.
Yes. And I really liked it because like we're so in like I guess the way Jonathan Glazer goes is he just throws you into a scene and you gotta like pick up where
Pay
you are and
attention.
what's
Yeah.
happening and this thing. And that's where it stops. And I think at that point I feel like the film stopped being so distant and it
Mm.
sort of became like it was making a statement where it's like this is
Wake
bad.
up call.
Like yeah, it was a wake up call for me. Like
Yeah.
it was like I think it amplified the sounds of the screams at that time, and then it turned the red flower into red. I
Well,
liked
Mm.
it. I understand it was a risky artistic move, and I understand if someone doesn't like it. Particularly also if someone doesn't like the night vision scene. I think because the night vision scene moved me, I'm going to say it's a good scene, but I can understand how it was a very
your
arty
personal
and
reaction.
also it's like I think maybe we can talk about this. It's sort of like when you know a director's previous work, you sort of like give him passes for this work. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
I know who Jonathan Glazer is. I've seen under
Remind
the
me what else
skin.
has he
I
done?
know he's
I can't remember.
so he's done
That's not me at all. I approach every movie by itself, but continue.
he's done Sexy Beast, which was
That's a good
that
movie.
crime gangster film, which was it's a good film, but it's nothing of this caliber, I would say. The second film he made is a film called Birth, where Nicole Kidman's husband dies, and a little boy comes to her door and then says that he's the husband and has a lot of evidence to back it up. I didn't like the film very much, but it's I think I need to rewatch it. Third film I really liked a lot, which was Under the Skin with Scarlett Johansson, where
I've been meaning to watch that one actually.
yeah, it's very, very good. I'm not going to talk too much about it. I liked it a lot. And then here, fourth is Zone of Interest. So he actually hasn't made a lot of films. I think he's done a lot of like music videos and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
But these things I feel like are just, it's not like this is good or this is bad or this is +1 star on my rating or -1 star on my rating. I feel like it's just what's effective for you as a
Absolutely.
viewer,
Absolutely.
you know? And I think the red thing, well, one thing we saw this with Christy, Anand's partner, as well. And she pointed out to me afterward that we're conditioned by Hitchcock to view red as like a violent color, which I don't think I've watched enough Hitchcock to really back that up. But I think there is definitely something like intentful behind that. It just didn't necessarily work for
Yeah.
me.
And
Yeah.
it's not like a fatal flaw in the movie or anything, but I
It's not
just
a fatal
No,
like
flaw.
no,
Yeah.
yeah.
there's a few little arty
Yeah.
touches that it's fine. It doesn't bother me
Because,
hugely,
yeah.
but just like I would cut it.
I think all the things that you're citing that you didn't like took you out of the movie, right?
Yeah.
And
That's why I didn't
I
like it. Yeah.
enjoyed it because it took me out of the
Yes, it's
movie.
the same point.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing I want to talk about is children in this film. and
Mm.
how they are affected by these
Mm.
sounds. And I think particularly there's a very evocative scene where he hears like I think the sounds are like, what is he doing? And he's like, he stole something, and he's like, drown him in the river. That you just hear these things in the background, and the kid starts parroting like
Well, the little boy
the
hears
little
this
boy
happening.
hears
Yeah.
this
Yeah,
happening, and then he
yeah,
starts muttering to himself, "Yeah, do this, do that." So
yeah,
this is corrupting, I mean,
yeah.
obviously, but it's sort of like the way that the film showed it was very,
Yeah.
very,
So
yeah.
there's a poison at the heart of it because, like, in these beautiful, like, this beautiful domesticity is based on this horrific atrocity,
Yeah.
and it poisons the heart of everything. Like these
I
kids
do
are
think so.
are
Yeah.
fucked up, you know,
Yeah.
because
Yeah. And if the garden started to die, that would be too much, right? Like that's too on the nose, but it's
Yes.
still that idea that you
Mhm.
can't build something good off of like a fundamentally evil
Yeah,
foundation. But I think
yeah.
that scene is one of the most effective uses of the sound design.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mhm.
So good. Yeah.
I think the other thing with the kids is it's a way too where he shows the hypocrisy of like the society they built. Like at one point, the mom brags or says something like she tells one of the other kids like, oh, like the other one went first, so now it's you went first, so it's the other one's turn, like basically like teaching the kids fairness. And she's like does it in front of someone else to kind of show off, oh, aren't I like a good
A great
mom
mom.
teaching my kids to
Yeah.
be fair, while
Yeah.
we're slaughtering people by the thousands a
Yeah.
hundred feet away. So it
Yeah.
Yeah.
just, I mean, what a, you know,
The juxtaposition.
yeah, what a juxtaposition. Yeah,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
yeah.
Okay, so before we go to the last two topics, I just want to ask, like, is there anything that you felt was amiss from this film that you wanted to see that wasn't there? Is there anything that you would do to improve on it, other than obviously the things that you've mentioned? Um, what, anything at all?
Honestly, I think this is a great. Honestly, I think the first time I saw this, I thought it was very good with a few little misses for me, and I think I gave it 4 stars. On
Mhm.
second viewing, I would bump it up. I think it's really
Yeah.
good. Like I said, I would cut some of the arty stuff, except we haven't talked about it yet. I guess we'll probably get there. Except the end
I
when
knew
they
Oh
cut to
yeah,
the
yeah.
we'll
day.
do
We'll
the
get to the
ending.
end. We'll
We'll
Are
get.
we
get there.
are we gonna talk
I
about
think that was actually an incredibly strong and emotional and effective and thematically rich choice. But leaving that aside, I think I would probably cut some of the arty stuff. Otherwise, I mean, this thing's just it's a great script. It's really it's a smart conceit for a movie. It's shot well. It's the acting's good. It's really good.
Mm.
Yeah, and I think for me, the mark is like, did I feel actually physically impacted by the film? Like, I love coming out of a book or a film where I actually have goosebumps or I actually feel like not just emotional or intellectually. I just felt like I was like, what did I just experience? Like, it really transported me to another state. And
Mhm.
that I think is like the mark of a great film. Do you guys, so we talked a lot about the sound design. Is there music in the movie?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
His musician is a person called Micah Levy, I believe,
Okay.
and they do like lots of like ethereal sounds and things like that.
Yeah. I think,
They did something really good in Under the Skin. It was also
yeah.
same similar soundtrack.
This is probably just purely a personal preference, but I do tend to prefer soundtracks or scores that are a little bit more like melodic and less minimal. And I understand it's his artistic choice and definitely backs up the rest of the sound design, but that would probably be my only thing if I were in the production that I would have like advocated for is like, can we get some melodic strings or something that's like more cohesive or like a theme?
Yeah.
But that's
Mhm.
very traditional and old school, so I don't think it would fit with his vision.
Mhm.
I just want to really give props to all the filmmakers for this, for the historical accuracy and the amount of like archival research that they did into this. And there were a lot of like little tidbits that I really enjoyed, like when they had the garden scene where all the family is just like picnicking and enjoying life. You can see the billowing smoke from the train coming through, and then you can even hear in the background that when the prisoners would come out, or I don't know what you'd call them.
Yeah, I was also like, what do you call them? Yeah,
Yeah, but like as they were coming out, they would play like classical music to soothe them or something like
Mhm.
that. And
Huh.
at that time, that they were arranging them into two roles. One is the people who can work, and one that's going straight to the gas chambers. And all of that is happening in the background, and all of them had little touches to remind you as you're
Mm.
seeing a scene of this idyllic domesticity. And I think it invites more and more further viewing, especially like it really enticed me to go back and read more about the Second World War and the atrocities
Mm.
that happened there.
Mm.
So I just wanted to give props to them for that. And
It's
like,
it's so good. You know, the other thing too is the first time I saw it, I thought, wow, this is, great, a great film. Um, but would it kind of like this is maybe the wrong word, but like, is it a little gimmicky of like, okay, I get like once you know the
Yeah,
conceit, it kind of just does that,
yeah, over and
Um,
over.
but I didn't feel that at all rewatching it. I
yes,
thought
yeah,
there's a strong story there. It's
yeah.
incredibly affecting, and yeah,
But I think
very good.
Anand maybe has a point. This is something I think about a lot because one of my favorite books is Pachinko, and she researched that group of people for 11 years before even starting the book. And so I think there is something the audience can feel when something is like really well researched, even if like
Mm.
I usually don't know any of the fun facts that Anand already knows, and you don't know going in
No, no,
either.
no, no.
But I do think you can still feel it, and it can still
Yeah.
really come through, even if you don't know like countless and
No,
countless hours of
Yeah.
research went into
I
totally,
it.
totally.
yeah.
Like
And
I just watched Gladiator 2 last night, and it was not very well researched.
yes.
And you
Yeah.
felt it.
I mean,
Well,
I always like it when the director has put a lot of stuff in the film, but it's only if you want to repeated viewings you will get it, but otherwise you don't have to get it if you
Yeah.
don't want to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think for the first time viewer, it's a better film for having had that. Even if I don't like literally know in my mind the facts or the details, I still think it comes across somehow and it really
Absolutely.
is effective. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so now I want to
Are we
talk.
going to talk about the acting before?
Oh yeah, yeah,
Just
yeah,
just
sure.
real quick.
Yeah.
I don't think we have a lot to say except for
Yeah.
it was fantastic, but I also think the main woman,
Yes.
uh,
Sarah Huller, I believe that's her name.
yes,
yeah.
Sandra
Oh, she's great.
Sarah
She's
Yeah.
great.
is fantastic. And Anand reminded me that she's also in Anatomy of a Fall. And between that and this, she's probably like my most favorite female actress at this point. Like to play that character, A, to play a Nazi's wife, B, though, to like just she embodied so many different facets in such a there was no like hesitation. I feel like she really knew what she was trying to portray and just like did it on screen. She was amazing.
And she
Yeah.
was very reticent to take this role because she didn't want to portray a Nazi and all of
I think she's fantastic. I don't, I never know really that what to say about acting other than like it was good,
that. Yes,
It
yeah.
was, but we can feel it, even though we don't know
Yeah,
anything. You can feel
yeah,
it
They
as
were
an
very
audience. Yeah.
believable. Like I believe they were a
yeah,
couple. I believed that they were having this strife. I believed everything about
And I
them.
do think, like you talked about the house being built from scratch. I think the set design was great. The costuming was great. I mean, I don't know enough to know what artistic choices were made, but I feel like just the composition of all the shots and like, it's just, yeah, really well
Okay, the
done.
best actor in this film was the dog. That was the best dog acting I've ever seen.
Right.
Fantastic.
You know, I think too is like the acting is so important to telling the story too. I mean, like it is for any from almost every movie, of course,
Yeah.
but like because so much of where this hits you is you like what you were saying earlier of getting sucked into like the little human drama of this relationship story, and then realizing, oh, what the, but like they're Nazi,
Yeah,
like that twist. So having that come across so realistically that you actually get sucked into like, oh yeah, that is kind of shitty that he has to go, and then you go. So I think having strong performances was really central to making that,
absolutely.
that kind of central tension work. And I mean, they're
That's a great
she was
point. Yeah.
incredible. He was really good. Yeah.
In
Yeah.
fact, I think the whole opening sequence was exquisite. Like I liked the idea where one of the Polish helpers, she's pouring that little vodka glass for him, and you're like, what is he doing? Why is she doing
Yeah.
that? And then she's like very carefully putting it on the
Very good
table.
storytelling.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
like the guy comes in with the boots, the commandant takes off his boots and goes in the house, and a little Jewish kid comes and takes the boots and washes them, and then blood all comes out of them, and like or she gives him like a fur coat, and then as she puts on the fur coat, she realizes there's some stuff inside, and she just dismisses it. It's from an actual Jewish, but it's like all of
Yeah.
these things.
No, but then
Perfect
you
way of
see,
introducing.
but then you see like the glass is set out so he can cheers because it's his birthday
Yes,
or he got promoted. I forgot what
yeah.
happened, but I
Yeah.
do really like the visual storytelling.
And it
Yeah,
also shows you he has so many people under him. You know what I mean? It's like he's the commandant, all of that. It's very, very well done, I think it
Yeah.
was.
do you guys?
Hey,
Because
last thing, what's that?
well, I was just gonna say, do you guys want to talk? We can cut it if you don't, but the whole scene where he is disgusted by swimming in the river because he realizes that there's
I
ashes.
I was just going to bring it up because I think that is so effective, and a theme that we've touched on but haven't got that deep in. Because I really think the whole thing is about presenting this beautiful domesticity and all this, and just like the poison at the heart of it, but like pollution, like how that pollutes all society. It doesn't
Yeah,
just pollute society; it
yeah,
pollutes this beautiful nature they like because they like
Yeah.
right.
yeah.
These aren't in a way like they're not like cosmopolitan urbanites, like they
No, they're
like
very connected to, yeah.
Yep, they love going in the river and the woods and the field, and the sickness at the heart of what they're doing pollutes their domestic life. It doesn't pollute it pollutes the environment. It pollutes like the nature around them.
Which is set up by that first scene, which is them in the river. Like it's so genius. Like he has planted that seed way like at the very beginning of the film. So I love
Yeah.
that point. My point though is just like you caused this. It's wild to me that you can be disgusted by this and freak out and like immediately bathe your kid when this is literally your hands like you caused this.
I mean, to me, it's sort of like a plant factory owner, and then his guy is
Yeah.
dumping pesticides, and like, dude, what are you
Yeah.
doing? Yeah,
Yeah, no, but we're
this is
all
because he like
right.
we're
We're all complicit in various things, right? Like we all, I'm sure we all think that, climate change is important,
yeah
is a horrible thing and an important issue, yet we all live modern lives with,
Yeah.
creature comforts, and where do
Yeah.
we think this comes from? And
Yeah.
we all
and
know they're connected, but we go on living our lives and yeah.
it's kind of interesting because the Nazis' main prerogative is like lebensraum, their living space that they thought that they need to grow and breed. And there's like a full natalism in Nazi
Mm,
society. And all this land is wonderful. This Russian land should be ours, but it's
mm,
polluted with these
mm,
Untermensch, like
mm,
that needs to be wiped out. So it's their form of cleansing, I guess, in
mm,
their mind that they're purifying the land.
I think it's a really important scene because it's where the like one of the few times you see him being confronted with the horror that he's inflicted. And I
mm,
feel like what he's going to do is just be like, why is this happening? We need to be polluting somewhere else, like not in my river where I bathe.
Yeah.
And then life will go on. Like, are there moments where he's actually thinking, like, am I doing something off or
No,
not?
absolutely not.
No.
He has
Except,
not even one thought. Is
except
yeah.
for when he vomits. Do you want to go to the ending?
No, no.
You
Before
want
the ending, I want to talk about something that's very important to me, is because I want to talk about arguments in favor of not only making films about atrocities, but also entertaining ones. And
mm,
I think that we should continue making films like this and Schindler's List and All Quiet on the Western Front and all other anti-war films. And I want to talk specifically about not just the Holocaust, but about all the other myriad of atrocities that occur all
mm,
throughout history that no one talks about. And I feel like the Holocaust is so pervasive in human society. It's
mm,
very distant from myself. I'm in Singapore, I'm an Asian, but I know about it so intensely. But I know very little about the gulags. I know very little
mm,
about the Middle Eastern slave trade or the Atlantic. You know what I mean? And
mm,
I know about the Holocaust a lot. I'm not trying to diminish the Holocaust. We should all know about the Holocaust. But I want to describe I've been reading a lot of Anne Applebaum recently, and she describes a scene in Russia while she was interviewing for her book, where there were these tourists gleefully buying like Stalin or Leninist communist memorabilia on the street with all the red stars, and they were like happy buying it on the streets of Moscow. This was pre-war, and she was shocked because no one would ever do this with Nazi memorabilia.
mm,
Do you know what I mean? And I think it's because of a lack of storytelling and a lack of education. I mean, no matter how many museums you have, no matter how many like very good documentaries or books written, films are important in conveying messages and keeping these stories alive. Like, I think that we should, even if it's bad, like at least people know things. And of course, there are other reasons for why we don't know much about what happened in Russia or the Soviet Union because they were the allies and they helped defeat them, and we didn't want to think we were replacing one dictator with another. That's all fine, but we should know more about things, and I think film is a good way to do that. What do you guys think? Obviously, done tastefully must be not be done like propaganda or whatever. But I think we should keep making films. And what do you guys?
I mean, to me, it's just evidence that the US dominates filmmaking. Like the Holocaust is a very US obsessed topic. And the reason why we don't have movies on all of those other atrocities is because of the US's dominance in Hollywood, is what I would take away. So I would like really want to support like Asian filmmakers and Middle Eastern filmmakers, get them funding, et cetera, et cetera.
Absolutely.
But yeah, for sure.
No, I totally agree. Yeah, I mean, I agree with your broader point on like telling these stories, even if it's done in an entertaining way, keeps them alive, and that's important. So yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, and I also I along a view I have is that we have enough World War II films.
I know,
I'm
exactly.
more I'm more open to a movie that's like about the atrocity of the Holocaust specifically as opposed to World War II generally, but like it has been, it's been 80 plus years of nonstop World War II movie making. Many of them are very good and have moved me greatly, and I think they're fantastic. But it's just enough. There's a lot of other human history, and I'd love to see those stories told. Just and not even as some great moral gesture.
Yeah,
Just in terms of like a moviegoer who wants to see interesting stuff and is tired of seeing over and over and over again World War II stories. There's a lot of human history to tell stories about, and I would love to see other
uh,
episodes told.
I'll just say two things. Number one, I guess yes, World War II stories, but I think mostly you're talking about the European theater, which
Yeah.
has been done to death. I think there's a lot that happened in the Pacific that maybe not as much, maybe the Battle of Midway, but you're right.
Yeah.
Everything that focuses on America, there's a lot,
Yeah, there's Chinese films about, there's a lot of
Yeah.
Chinese films about
Yes.
Japanese
Oh,
rape of,
atrocities.
But
yeah,
yeah,
Yeah.
but
in the global market,
Hollywood. So
American movies dominate, and that's what America
yeah,
wants to hear about. And
yeah.
I don't know, I mean,
Absolutely.
I enjoy reading history a fair amount. I mean, it's maybe not the top thing I read, but I do read a decent amount of it, and I'm constantly reading about historical episodes and just thinking like, why hasn't anyone made a movie about this? Like,
Absolutely.
I read a book on the transatlantic slave trade a few years back, and one of the things I was shocked and really fascinated to learn is that especially when the Portuguese were bringing slaves from Africa to what's now Brazil. Um, at least at the start of that slave trade, the people who were slaves had been prisoners of war. So whatever various nations in Africa had captured
Oh,
people, enslaved them, and then sold them to the Portuguese, and then they brought them to Brazil.
makes
Well,
sense.
what happens when you have a bunch of people who are actually like trained soldiers as your slaves? A lot of them
Oh,
escape. So at
oh,
least
yeah.
at the start of the slave trade, that part of the slave trade, they a lot of slaves escaped and formed independent societies, one of which lasted 100 years and fought
Wow.
the Portuguese. Like which
What?
This is a
like
film. This is
I
a
Yeah,
know that
film.
it's a film. How is that not a movie?
yeah,
How has no one made a movie about this? Like that's incredible, you know?
Link to that book here. There we
yeah.
go. She doesn't know how to do it, but she's gonna
That's
have to put
so
all these
hard though,
links.
because studios are so risk averse. This is why I do think streaming is maybe net positive. Like, I don't know, everyone wants the market first before they're willing to like back. Anyway, I don't know that much about the
There,
business of it.
also, maybe we haven't talked about this, or we have. I don't know, but this I don't want to talk too much about Jonathan Glazer's Oscar speech because it talks a lot
Oh,
about
right.
current politics and things like that, and I don't want to get into all of that. But I do want to say, like this film, it's made about the Holocaust, which, as you said, there's a lot of films made about it, but it's sort of made to make you think about things that are happening now. It's meant to stand the test of time, and I think it will. What do you think about that? Because I was often thinking about what are we doing now that we're probably
Hmm.
like,
Hmm.
turning a blind eye to.
Hmm.
Did you guys get the same feeling or
Oh yeah, no, for sure, for
Yeah,
sure.
definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think
Um,
that's a common like call to action from most like artists or filmmakers is like to self-reflect and
mhm.
introspect. But I do think there's a difference between like making your art as a vessel for a message and then like using your speech as at the Oscars, your acceptance speech. I feel like that was very brave of him, and he took like a personal risk in doing that. Um, but yeah, that's just some thoughts on that one.
Yeah, but I also think it shouldn't just touch upon those issues that he mentioned. It should be like for all time. What
But I think it
I mean,
is.
it's a
Yeah,
timeless message. It's not
yeah.
Yeah.
purely over what's
Yeah,
happening now.
but I do think I mean, it's a timeless story. Like
Yeah.
humans have been doing atrocities since societies existed. And so, in that sense, like love is a timeless story, war is a timeless story. Apparently, mass killing is too. But yeah, I definitely think he wanted it to be relevant and contemporary.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it was, but I think to your point, he the theme he's plucking is broad enough and resonant enough that it can apply to a lot of things, sadly.
Exactly. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are getting to the ending of the film. Lillian, do you want to give us a brief synopsis of what happens in the end of this film? By the way, spoiler alert,
Yeah.
watch this movie. This is a very powerful ending, and you should experience it without knowing what it is.
I'm going to start it off and then jump to Mike because he's seen it most recently. But the main thing that strikes me about the ending is we do have a flash forward to the Auschwitz museum, and we see the people who are cleaning it, opening it up for the day for tourists to come. And that happens, we're like abruptly thrust forward when I think that happens when the commandant he just got promoted or he's in some office building.
He's going down this very dimly lit staircase, and then he suddenly convulses and starts puking.
But nothing comes out. He's dry retching.
Which I think the second time something comes out. He does it twice.
So I think it's supposed to. Okay, this is my interpretation.
It actually doesn't matter, but
it matters. Okay, it definitely matters to me because I feel like it's like that feeling of like, because when you puke, you feel better. And you feel better because you got the bad stuff out.
Revulsion puke.
No, I think you feel better. I think it's very human to relate to when you puke, you feel better, the bad stuff is out. For him, nothing can come out. He hasn't wrestled with it. He doesn't acknowledge it as bad. He's in this constant state of like psychic horror because of what he's done, but he can't feel any like solace in like getting the bad stuff out.
I like this interpretation. I will commandeer it as my own interpretation.
But can you first check that nothing comes out? I'm pretty sure.
I think the second time something comes out.
Okay, we can double check.
It's a little, definitely the first time's a dry heave, because I just watched it half an hour ago or whatever.
Oh, yeah,
definitely the first time's a dry heave. The second time, it's a little unclear. But Lily, I think that's such a smart interpretation.
I like it. I like the end.
Well, I just always feel better after I puke, so I would like want to get it out, but I feel like the fact that he can't is like supposed to be the point.
Absolutely.
But what else happens at the end, Mike? Is that like the main thing?
That's pretty much it. You got, so he's in, I can't remember where they send him. He gets promoted. He goes to the party. He calls his wife. He's walking down this dimly lit hallway. He kind of dry heaves.
But he has a medical checkup, right? They check his stomach, right? And then he tries to get in touch with his wife.
I think this was all before, because the flashback to the flash forward to the modern day is right at the end. Like he's walking down the hallway, flash forward, we see the current day museum, and then it flashes back, he walks a little bit more, and then movie ends.
Okay, maybe this is controversial or something, but I don't think we should have left the house. Maybe I don't know, like a lot of the parts where he does that big speech where they're ramping up the Holocaust and he goes to that big party. And I guess that argument that you made that he was thinking about that drove it home, but it felt a little bit of a come down from the house thing. But I guess also your argument is that it doesn't want to be too repetitious of like the events in the house.
But what do you guys think of the flash forward?
I think it's so smart. I think it.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it.
That made the film.
That made it. It really hit me emotionally.
Okay.
I have some thoughts on what I think it's doing or saying, but I actually don't know. It's a bit,
go for it.
But like, to me, the question. So, he has this retching, right? He has this poison inside of him or whatever. He has whatever guilt or maybe it's so bad he doesn't know it's guilt. And then we cut to these women walk into what was the camp and is now like the museum of the camp, and the crematorium is there and the oven's there. There is an exhibit with just hundreds, thousands of shoes and personal effects piled up from the victims, and they're just cleaning it, like they're just sweeping. And it's not human ashes, it's just dust, and they're just wiping the glass down. And like anyone working a job, they're doing it in they probably do this every day.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it's no longer, heartbreaking and to them and horrifying. It's just their job, and they come and wipe it down, and it's what it is. It's banal.
It's the banality of maybe.
And what he's asking is like he's sort of plucking the theme of this was allowed to happen because of the banality of evil, the people who
were numb to it.
And now we're at risk, especially as the last folks who lived through this are starting to die off or have died off. We are at risk of ourselves becoming numb to it and it just becoming just another thing in a museum.
Absolutely.
And we're not connecting to it. And I thought it was really powerful.
Yeah, it was powerful. I think the thing that I got from the vomiting thing was that I thought that no matter how ideologically racist you are or whatever you believe, if you're mass murdering
Yeah.
100,000 people and seeing all this death every single day, it is going, I don't believe in a soul, but it's going to damage your soul. It's going to
Yeah.
wound your soul.
Yeah.
And something with it you cannot, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there are people that are mass murderers that sleep well at night. I like that this film is saying no, that there's something in you that knows, and it's a human revulsion to
Mm.
all of this. And I did like that the everything you said, I agree with regards to the flash forward, and particularly it took me out of the film and made me remember that
Yeah.
this is really happening. And it
Yeah.
reminded me a little bit of that Spike Lee film. What was that film with Black Klansman? At the
Oh yeah.
very end, he shows images of like
Oh yeah,
Charlottesville
I've seen
and
that.
things of that nature, where it
Yeah.
brings you back into thinking
Yeah.
like this isn't the end,
Yeah.
there's stuff still happening.
Or this isn't just an escape. Like, yeah, you're at the movies, but let's remind you that you're
Absolutely.
still in society.
Black
Yeah.
Sabbath maybe was a little bit too on the
I
nose, but I
know.
still appreciated what he was
Yeah.
going for.
I
Here,
think
I
it,
think was
yeah.
I'm not trying to compare them, but
Yeah.
this was done
But I do think it
flawlessly.
works in that movie just because Charlottesville was so recent. You
Absolutely.
know, it's hard, like, sure, if it was like the MLK speech or something that's in the past, but this was like, no, it's literally happening right now. But anyway,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. All right. I guess we're towards the tail end. Is there any last things you want to say, Lily?
No, I covered all my points. What about you, Mike?
No, I think we hit it all. I think it's a really good movie, and I think people should see it if they haven't.
Yeah. Honestly, yeah, I would really very strongly recommend this over anything. Yeah, it was my quote unquote.
Over all other movies.
Yeah,
Is
no,
it?
I mean, no.
Oh, okay. Over
Actually, you
any
know what?
no,
I'm
no,
gonna
what is
say it.
it?
I recommend this over all other movies. Please watch this. It is important to watch. I think it's a good. I'm very glad that he made this, and it was my quote unquote favorite film of 2023. It feels weird saying that,
Mm.
but yeah, please. I think it's worth watching, and it should be watched. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks for joining us, Mike.
Thank you so much,
No
Michael.
problem. Thanks for having me on, guys.